Many may not understand the following, but it's the absolute truth. People function based upon the narratives that have been fed into their minds. And it doesn't matter that the information is untrue. The only thing that matters is that people believe that the information is true. This is not science fiction. It's a true social science fact. I will prove that millions of people can be controlled through false narratives by using the American soldiers as an example. Narratives are always used to program the minds of soldiers during war. Case, point, and proof. Whenever the white ruling class wants to go to war for a hidden nefarious reason that serves their hidden agendas, they always create a false narrative that conceals that true hidden agenda and reason for going to war. The false narrative is always a positive one that claims that the soldiers will be righting a wrong. They then present that false narrative to the soldiers. These millions of soldiers will then accept the narratives and then start functioning based upon the narratives as being factual. These soldiers will then go travel thousands of miles away and end the lives of strangers based upon the narrative. Some soldiers will lay down their lives based upon the narrative. Many soldiers will then return home, perceiving themselves as being heroes, when in reality, the war was an unjust war. It doesn't matter that the narratives are untrue. What only matters is that the soldiers believed that the narratives were true. People live, die, and function based upon the narratives that they've been given and have accepted as being true. Likewise, the same social science of utilizing false narratives to control the collective minds of the masses and targeted populations is also used to against the masses, to shape the minds towards an implied objective. Presently, millions of people are not actually thinking for themselves. They are instead functioning based upon false narratives that serve the hidden agendas of the ruling elites. The worst of this situation is that once the false belief has been successfully embedded into the human mind, many people have no interest in learning the truth that's the contrary of the embedded belief. And they will even make enemies of those who try to teach them the truth. It's an inherent flaw within the human psyche. But this condition is far worse for the oppressed. Because while most people usually have the right to believe whatever they choose to believe, there's a profound exception to this rule when it comes to the oppressed. The oppressed must gain a clear, concise, and accurate understanding of our plighted condition in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings are flawed, then all of our liberating strategies that stem from those flawed understandings will also be flawed. This is why those who know the truth must teach. And it's precisely why white oppressive forces, why propagandists, to be specific, have spread so much false narratives into the Black community. They literally have our communities drowning in disinformation. We now have millions that are insisting that we're the true Jews found within a Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies, and that was actually brutally beaten into submission within the blood-soaked minds of our enslaved ancestors. People actually believe that. No premise could be more absurd, but it's believed by millions. We also now have millions that are insisting that we, African Americans, are not from Africa, but are instead the true indigenous Americans. Although millions of African Americans have taken DNA analysis that have scientifically confirmed our African identity. The narrative that we're not from Africa is actually fraudulent propaganda created by white propagandists. That false narrative creates division between those of us that knows that we're from Africa and those that have been misled to believe that we're not from Africa. It also creates conflict between the indigenous Americans and African Americans. When the indigenous Americans and the African Americans are kept divided, this makes the U.S. system of white supremacy much stronger. The narrative that we are the true indigenous Americans instead of Africans also divides us from Native Africans. When we Africans are divided globally, we lose our global numerical advantage and we're stripped of all hopes of ever defeating global white supremacy. The narrative that we're not from Africa is also designed to separate us from our unifying African heritage. Without having a base identity to connect to our vast cultural wealth, over time we become further fragmented and we become weaker as a people. We can then be made into anything the white oppressors wants us to be. White propaganda also created the ridiculous false narrative that we made the N-word ours and that using it ridiculously empowers us. Many black people then accepted those false narratives as being true and then started self-identifying themselves by the N-word. However, both of those narratives are the opposite of the truth. It was through negative media social engineering by white social scientists and white propagandists that we were made to we were manipulated to call ourselves by the N-word. The reason why they did this to us is because to subjugate and control a targeted population, the first step is to neutralize their alpha males, aka those possessing warrior spirits. These are the males that are psychologically wired to protect our women and defend our communities. White social scientists neutralized the black alpha male by socially engineering us to self-identify ourselves by the N-word. This is because words, when repeated often enough, has power over the subconscious mind. When we repeatedly call ourselves by the N-word, this psychologically conditions us to perceive ourselves through a false, inherent, subordinate identity that aids the white society in maintaining its social dominance over the black population. As long as we think we're by the N-word, we'll never fully stand up against the white society. And when we call each other by the N-word, we dehumanize each other, which makes it easier to mistreat each other and even kill each other. They've placed an elaborate spell upon our collective subconscious minds by creating the false narrative that we made the N-word ours and that using it now ridiculously empowers us. White propagandists also have millions of us believing that we're our worst enemies and that we therefore need the white society, to govern over our lives. This false narrative creates black self-loathing, division. It divides our ranks and it shifts black collective aggressions away from the white society and redirects it towards ourselves. They also condition millions of us to exclude the white society within all of our analysis regarding our plight and condition, and to instead always blame ourselves. White social scientists determined a long time ago that as long as we're kept within this collective condition, we can then be ruled over forever. This is the truth of our plight and condition, the truth that they don't want us to ever learn. The white oppressor's greatest power over black people is their ability to create false narratives that keeps us thinking and behaving and functioning in ways that are against our own self-interest and that instead serve the system of white supremacy. It's the truth of our plight and condition. They've transformed it into their greatest power. They transformed it into a weapon of mass destruction against the black population. It's time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.